Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming coordinator for the Osterville Village Library. Thank you so much for joining us today on this brisk Saturday. And to our friends joining us on Zoom, thank you for being here as well. Back by popular demand, we have an exciting program to bring you. Steve Farrar, adventurer, explorer, owner of Best View Adventures and Peg Leg Presentations, is coming to the OVL monthly, bringing us on a tour of the various national parks. I can't begin to tell you how excited we all are to have this program back with us. We are truly honored. So without further ado, here's Steve Farrar with America's Best Idea, a National Parks Smorgasbord.
I'm not going to be tied to the computer. I can roam. Well, welcome. Thanks for braving the cold and coming to visit. Steve Farrar. A couple of business notes in terms of we're gonna have a tour of today of the National Park Service units. There are 63 U.S. national parks, and the lines are getting blurred a little bit, and I'll go through why, but the Park Service is starting to refer to all of those units as national parks, and they're not. What we're going to learn today is the distinction between the different unit designations, so that this is kind of an overview. We'll go through with pictures of each of the types of units. By the way, I don't work for the National Park Service, so if they're doing stuff very well, they get kudos. If there's room for improvement, I'm free to volunteer that as well. Most of the pictures you're going to see are, if I'm in them, they're my pictures. I started in 1969. I was a 14-year-old Eagle Scout, very full of myself. I got chosen to represent the New England troop at the National Jamboree, which that year was out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So I've never been out of New England before, but I've climbed Mount Washington, and that's 6,000 feet, and that's as tall as you can get, right? Well, we had they flew us into Salt Lake City, and we had a 5-day road trip up through the West on our way to Idaho. First stop was Jackson Hole. Get off the bus at I don't know if you know the geology of the Grand Tetons, but there's no front range. It's a fault system. So there's a 6,000 foot sheer rise from Jackson Hole to the top of the Grand. And my jaw dropped. I had never seen something like that. But then we got on the bus, drove 27 miles up to Yellowstone, and got off and ran over and watched Old Faithful go up, and your jaw drops again. We continued up the road to Glacier and had a snowball fight in July. And my very impressionable 14-year-old head said, if this is what national parks are all about, I think I'd like to see more of them. Well, it ended up, I've been to all 63 of them, and that's what we'll be recounting through the year. They'd like me to keep things to an hour. You can only do 4 or 5 parks to do justice to them in an hour's time. So it takes 11 one-hour presentations to effectively give you a virtual tour of all 63 parks. So if you keep coming last Saturday of each month, by December, you'll have seen all the national parks. All right, so let's go. This is, I'm standing on top of the north rim of Yosemite here, looking straight across the Yosemite Valley at Hefno. America's Best. Back when the Park Service started, 1916, they had just completed the railroads, and the railroads wanted all the Philadelphia, Manhattan, and Bostonians with their money to ride the railroads to pay for them. So they started this See America poster campaign with all the parks. You'll remember that one, because we're gonna visit that in a newer picture later. But this is a new bureau under the Department of the Interior. Anywhere you go on a Park Service administered place, you're gonna see the logo on the Ranger, on the signs at the visitor center, all over the place. The arrowhead, a nod towards Native Americans. The tree, the lake, and the mountain represent the treasures that the Park Service is charged with protecting. And the bison is, the buffalo is on the Department of the Interior logo, so just a reminder of who's the boss here. As of this week, if he gets cleared, Doug Burgum is gonna be our new Secretary, Interior. He has the National Park Service, but he also has Bureau of Land Management, Ocean, Fish and Wildlife. It's a lot of people, a lot of big job. He will choose a director for the National Park Service. The current one, Chuck Sands, doesn't have a lot of Park Service experience. He's realistically probably gonna be replaced by somebody from inside the Park Service. Under his jurisdiction, he's got 22,000 employees to take care of. Is a $3 billion budget. And it falls to him to make sure that 325 million people a year have a good time when they come to the national parks. You throw out these numbers, 325 million people. How many is that? Just to put it in perspective. Anybody been to Disney World? You know the lines to get to Space Mountain or somewhere that they're experts at handling numbers there's a lot of people cumulative through the year, day after day after day, that go to Disney World. Now, we're north of the Mason-Dixon, so I don't know how many NASCAR fans we have here, but down south, it's a big deal. They like watching the cars go round and round. But you get 30, 40,000 people at NASCAR events. Well, they're all over the place. All of the attendees all year long that go to all the NASCAR events. And for good measure, every NHL team's complete schedule, the whole league, NBA, all the football stadiums, add up all the people for all of them, they don't add up to 325 million. There are more people that go to national parks every year than all of those combined. This is what we're gonna see. The crown jewels are the national parks, but there are different units under the Park Service. We'll cover those. I'm up in New Hampshire. If I come down Route 3, I go by Lowell, and there's the National Park Service sign on the side of the road. Lowell Mills was, I'll get to it, National Historic Parks. But the National Historic Park sign is on the side of the road. Well, if you come down Route 3 and hit 128, the sign at Lexington says Minuteman National Park. And the problem is there are no national parks in Massachusetts. That's not correct. What it is it's a National Historic Park. And I'm not nitpicking. There are different rules depending on the nomenclature, whatever your title is, whatever your category of unit is, you play by different rules. When I say they're blurring it, money talks. Their Park Service is partnering with LL Bean. You can get your canvas bag that says, find your park. The literature for that says, with over 400 parks, there aren't 400 national parks. There's 400 units of the Park Service. Different park baggers, when you go to parks, can collect different things. Next time I'll bring my patches. I was a Boy Scout, so I have embroidered patches up the wazoo. But I have a stretch frame with an embroidered patch from each park. You can also, this is the anniversary, 100th anniversary. There's a passport any of the 433 units. If there's a visitor center, you can go up to the counter and there's a passport stamp that has the date that you were there and the name of it and stuff. So it's kind of a collectible. We have to start with the miscellaneous and work our way up. This is the catch-all. There are places that aren't assigned to anybody, but somebody's got to look after. There's 50 acres on the National Mall that somebody's got to mow the lawn. Somebody's got to pick up the goose droppings so that visitors have a good time. The Constitution Gardens are one of the other units under the Park Service. If you are in a position to endow an organization with enough money to build something, you get naming rights. Catherine Schaus wanted a performance center in Washington, DC. So she had this built, and unfortunately she wanted it to be called a national park. So if you're driving, this is the beltway around DC, like 128 around Boston. You do a double take, Wolf Trap National Park, what the devil is that? She calls it the National Park of the Performing Arts. It's a very nice place to go see a concert, to see a performance. It's not a national park, but that's the name of it. This is under the Park Service to take care of. It's over the Potomac into Virginia. St. Croix straddle up in Maine, straddles the Maine-Canadian border. It's an island. The early French settlement is there. They want it protected. Park Service takes care of it. And there's a couple others. There's a museum in Seattle that was dilapidating because nobody was taking care of it. They gave it to the Park Service. That's the 14 other units. But we won't spend a lot of time on them. Moving up, and by the way, there's I think you have handouts that list these. The scenic trails. 1968, LBJ started the National Trail System. He named two. This is my lovely wife a few years ago. Sitting on the entrance where we were in North Cascades, which the Pacific Crest Trail runs from the Canadian border all the way to Mexico along the crest of the Cascades and the Sierra Nevadas. It's awesome. The eastern counterpart to that is the Appalachian Trail that runs Maine to Georgia, or Georgia to Maine if you start in the springtime. This is the northern terminus up at the top of Katahdin. So that was what the National Trail System consisted of. We just had a few years ago the 50th anniversary. What does any self-respecting government entity do in 50 years? 2 turned into 29. It grows. And it's split into National Historic Trails and National Scenic Trails. I don't know how the determination comes about as to which one they kept. The red ones are still under the Park Service. The others have been shunted off to different agencies to administer to. Any one of which we could talk for the rest of the hour on the Pony Express or the Iditarod or the Trail of Tears or any of those. A third Canada to Mexico trail is the Continental Divide, which any rain falling east of this divide drains to the Atlantic. Anything on the west ends up in the Pacific. It divides the continent. This is the 12,000 foot. If you're heading over Independence Pass, get to Aspen, you'll be there. The Iditarod used to start well south of Anchorage down in Seward and go 900 miles up to Nome. They don't get enough snow now. They start up in Wasilla, north of Anchorage. But there's a historic visitor center there. If you're on the Big Island, one of the trails it doesn't go up the volcanoes, it skirts the shoreline. You can go to the visitors center over in Hawaii in the town of Volcano and get your stamp there. Not all of them entail mountain climbing. You can measure elevation in Florida in inches. In a nice flat walk for miles. There's a Florida trail, National Scenic Trail. There's a map that basically says there aren't too many places in the lower 48 where you can either live or vacation and not be within a relative proximity to one of these trails. They're all over the place. This is a picture of the Potomac Heritage Trail. This is by Bart Smith. Anybody? Bart Smith? No? My new hero. This guy started in '92. He started hiking not the scenic trails, just the 11, I mean, not the historic trails, just the 11 scenic trails. It took him 16 years. He became the first person to hike all of the trails. Anybody see Forrest Gump?
Yes.
This guy gives Gump a run for his money. If you took a Gump trail and headed from Boston out to San Francisco, you'd have to walk 3,000 miles to get across the country. 3,000. To hike the 11 scenic trails is over 18,000 miles. It's walking across the United States 6 times. That's how much it entails. His wife was a nurse in Seattle and worked very hard while he played for 16 years. Well, he had a lot of time and he had some awesome pictures. Walkingdownadream.com is his website. And I actually have his book, awesome compilation of the pictures that he saw along the way. I have a few books up here. This is the library after all. All right, parkways. Parkways connect usually park systems. Blue Ridge Parkway, Shenandoah in the north connects down to, it terminates in Great Smoky Mountains, North Carolina. The beauty of the parkways, very few exits, no billboards, no advertising, no condos on the side of the road or anything. Beautiful, beautiful scenic drives. So that's one of them. Anybody familiar with the Rockefeller Parkway? You're gonna hear throughout the year the Rockefellers, we owe a serious debt to relative to a lot of the existence of the national parks. Rockefeller Parkway connects the Tetons with Yellowstone. It's 27 miles. Yellowstone was the first national park. When Grand Teton got named, quickly everybody started buying up and putting fences and properties and billboards on the side of the road between the two of them. John Jr., under an alias, formed a corporation, bought every single one of the properties along the 27 miles, and then turned it over to the government and said, here, I want a clean drive. So he gets it named after him. The Natchez Trace is, it's kind of fun. The Native American Indians used to hunt game for sustenance. They're up in either the Ozarks in Missouri or Tennessee, the hills. And when the snow comes, the game would travel down to the lowlands, down to Louisiana or Mississippi, where it wasn't cold. Well, that was their food source. So the Indians would follow the game. The Natchez Trace basically paved over this trail from Tennessee all the way down to Mississippi. It's 440 miles long, a very curvy road. And the fourth one is over on the shore of Virginia. This connects the early settlements, Jamestown, Colonial Williamsburg, and Yorktown, the three of them. Seashores and lake shores basically rim the entire coast of the country. North of San Francisco, Point Reyes is set aside, so not every inch is burnable houses in Malibu. There's some natural conserved shoreline, the barrier islands that protect Galveston in the Gulf, the Padre Island, NS's National Seashore. Over by the Panhandle, the Gulf Islands do the same thing for Pensacola. If you come around to the east side, just up by Cape Canaveral, at Kennedy Space Center, there's Canaveral National Seashore. Just over the border into Georgia, Cumberland Island is another section. Cape Hatteras on the Outer Banks is where the big famous 3 times moved because they don't learn that the shore is eroding and they keep having to move I think they moved this inland 3 times. Not far enough. Anyway, Maryland, Virginia border, there's an island that's got wild horses on it, Assateague. It's a fun day trip. South shore of Long Island, you got Fire Island, National Seashore. And then right here, Cape Cod National Seashore. I'm just Marconi. The Midwesterners kind of got their noses out of joint. What about us? We have shoreline too. So they get a token 3 up in Wisconsin, the Apostle Islands, National Lake Shore. Very fun on the UP. You can kayak around on the Upper Peninsula, picture rocks. It looks like somebody took food coloring at the top and let it drip down. Those are actually different seams of minerals that are all different colorations. It looks fake, but that's what it is. It's solid rock. And then Sleeping Bear Dunes is down in the lower peninsula of Michigan on the Lake Superior. No, Lake Michigan coast, sorry. Wild and scenic rivers. You can take an outfitter that's certified to run through the wild river. You can go on this tour. Your kids will be able to go on this tour. Their kids will be able to go on this raft. It's never going to be dammed. The river is protected. It will always run. Inside the Arctic Circle up in Kobuk, this is a historic crossing point in the caribou migration. They head up to the North Slope every year. Their crossing is protected. Merced did its part to carve some of the Yosemite Valley. We won't talk about Hetch Hetchy. We'll just say the Merced will never be dammed. Ansel Adams, Snake River going through the Tetons. This one might change a bit with the new administration. This would be Mexico and this would be America. So depending on how many of the partitions didn't get sold off, you might see that picture change, but that's the Rio Grande that separates. And we have one here in New England, the Allagash section that you might want to portage around. This one's tricky. National recreation area. Different people have different interpretations of recreation. So I lived out in San Francisco for a couple of years, just below the Golden Gate Park. The Golden Gate this NRA is National Recreation Area. There's soccer fields, there's horticultural buildings, there's all kinds of stuff, hundreds of acres. Recreation of a different kind. This is the fleet of houseboats waiting for the weekenders to come launch and go party for the weekend. Hell's Canyon in Idaho, very raw, very wild, protected area, hiking, camping, rappelling, mountain climbing. Gateway, people in the city need to recreate as well. All the green patches are cobbled together into the Gateway National Recreation Area. Most of the boroughs are represented. Actually, well, it sounds like a lot of visitors, but most of them live in Manhattan. So to get up to 10 million for the whole year, it's like a couple weekends you'll get that many. Here in Massachusetts, we have a national recreation area. 34 of the Boston Harbor Islands have been banded together as under the protective umbrella of National Recreation Area name. So you can go out to George's Island, you can take your boat out there, there's picnic tables, you get a great view of Boston's skyline and stuff. But you'll not see high rises being built there to take advantage of the view. It's public land. National memorials. Memorials are commemorative of either a person, which we'll learn later, who must be dead, to have a memorial named after them, or something that happened, an episode. Does not have to necessarily be at the place where the event took place. The Lincoln Memorial isn't his log cabin out in Illinois. It's in Washington, D.C. A lot of the memorials are in Washington, D.C. Iwo Jima isn't out on the island in the Pacific, it's up on the hill next to the Arlington Cemetery. Beautiful view, by the way. Across the Potomac. Teddy's my man. Teddy's my favorite. You really have to want to see this place and know how to get there. If you leave Washington, D.C. and drive over the bridge, over the Potomac, you gotta be in the far right-hand lane. As you get to the other shore, there's a sluice of an exit that you have to know it's there. You gotta be in the right lane to be able to get down there. And there's about 10 parking spaces that hopefully will have one open. If you can leave your car there, there's a footbridge that goes from the Virginia shore over to an island in the middle of the Potomac River. That's Teddy Roosevelt Island. That's where the memorial is. So it's hard to get to, but you'll have it to yourself. It's not very crowded. And there's quite a few of Teddy's quotes around the island. Jefferson with the reflection pond is DC, the Vietnam Memorial. Every one of the memorials has their own passport stamp. So I took my wife for Valentine's Day one year down to DC. The next day we strolled the mall, took 2 pages of my passport to get all the passport stamps for each of the memorials. There's that many of them in the area. They're not all in DC. In Outer Banks, Kill Devil Hill has a huge granite memorial to the site where the Wright brothers launched. Rushmore is a memorial, very cool access to the amphitheater at the base of them. You have to walk through, you get to walk through all of the 50 state flags lining it. You want to go in the morning, the faces face east. So if you go in the afternoon, they're going to be all shaded. There's the travel tip. Flight 93, 9/11 Memorial, that's where they brought the plane down in Pennsylvania. I titled this category Battlefield Parks. I don't know the nuances of distinctions. I took all the military units and put them all under one umbrella of battlefield parks. Gettysburg is called a military park. Awesome time. When you go to these places, the rangers that work there, sometimes they're 6 months and they move on to a different park and stuff. We had a lifer here. For 22 years, the guide on my tour there has been at Gettysburg. And there was not a question you could ask that he didn't. He would preface the answer with, how long-winded a response would you like? Because he just is a virtual encyclopedia of who was in charge of the battalion and what part of the country they were from and who they were opposing. And it's staggering how they really know their stuff. You can learn an awful lot. You feel like a sponge. They just keep giving you information. But Gettysburg, the military park, Manassas, for some reason, is called a battlefield park. I don't know what the distinction is. Most of these have to do with the Civil War. Antietam is a national battlefield. Shiloh is a military park. Vicksburg, very crucial to the North winning. Not all of them are Civil War. Big Hole. They call it a battle. a battlefield. It wasn't much of a battle. Chief Joseph was taking his Nez Perce. He didn't want to abide by the order to take his people to a reservation down in Oklahoma. He was trying to get up over the Canadian border. Red Cloud had already escaped the US and was up there with his people. He left South Dakota and almost made it. Cavalry caught up to them and at 6 in the morning rode down and slaughtered the entire settlement. So I don't know why they call it a battlefield. It wasn't much of a battle. National Historic Sites. These are where something, you can go to Ford's Theater and see where Lincoln got assassinated. They're never gonna tear it down and put a big, tall high rise there. It's protected. It's a National Historic Site. Jamestown, same thing, the first European settlement that survived. If you happen to be, hope nobody here is from Kansas, if you happen to be cruising through Topeka and have a little extra time, you can stop at the site of the Brown versus Board of Education, where it started. And if you hit Salt Lake City and head west, you're entering the Great Basin, and there is nothing. It's a big empty. However, Ranger Rick is out there at the site of the Golden Spike, where the intercontinental east driven and west driven, where the two railroads met to complete the intercontinental railroad. He's there giving the lecture about the event, the National Historic. There are no towns or anything anywhere near there. This one's not so fun a visit. This is one of the, I believe, 6 internment camps in World War II, where we took anybody of Japanese heritage and decided that they were not subject to the protection of US citizens. That's Mount Whitney, the tallest point in the lower 48. So it's on the east side of the Sierra Nevadas. I was there in August. It was 112 degrees. And in 1942, they did not have air conditioning. These are plywood shacks. They weren't insulated either. You go there in January and the cold snows come down. It's not a very hospitable place. There were over 10,000 detainees there.
Yeah.
Right here in Massachusetts, again, we don't have national parks, but there's quite a few of the units, national park units. The Armory, that supplied all the Northern Army for the Civil War. Frederick Law Olmsted, I guess there was a program here. If you have time, this is up in Brookline, and this was not only his residence, but he and his sons worked their offices there. Has the largest reservoir of original documents, thousands and thousands of them. This guy was seriously prolific. He was the father of American landscape architecture. He designed the emerald necklace around Boston, the fens and the arboretum and stuff. Some of his other projects, he got, if you do something well, you get continued to get tagged to do it again. Mid-1800s, New York said, I've got pigsties and swamp. Could you make something out of it? 100 acres. He set up Central Park in the middle of downtown New York. The Biltmore, not the castle itself in Asheville, but all the grounds, that's his doing. All those magnificent gardens that you take a whole day to get through those. Both Yosemite and Acadia, 2 of the earlier parks. He designed the grounds for West Point, the Capitol. This is mid-1800s are when a lot of the venerable institutions of higher learning were getting set up. So he designs Smith College, and then Mount Holyoke says, hey, come on over here and do this one. And then Stanford says, how about me? And Yale, and look at the list. This is only a partial list of he and his, like I said, he's very prolific. Did a lot of good work. Have his coffee table book there as well. Historical parks. almost a combo unit designation with the sites. Sites are a little smaller, parks are just similar but larger. Valley Forge, the whole Continental Army was there, so it encompasses a bigger spot than Ford's Theater. So it's a historic park instead of a historic site. Independence Hall takes up 6 blocks of Philadelphia with all kinds of President's Hall and the Liberty Bell and all kinds of stuff. Everybody knows the Lee and Grant signed the surrender documents at Appomattox, right? Appomattox was a federal courthouse and the documents were signed on a Sunday. The courthouse isn't open on Sunday. They were actually signed next door in the McLean House. So there's the actual desks. It's close, but you want to learn the nuances. I got $1 for anybody that can name the other 4. The Alamo itself is not a National Historic Site. It's one of 5 San Antonio missions in the National Historic Park. Sorry, I haven't been to the other 4. I've been to the Alamo. Chaco culture, the northwest corner of New Mexico, could spend a week there. Absolutely staggering and very, very good tip. Each of the visitor centers usually has a maybe 20-minute, 30-minute movie that gives great detail as to what's so important about this area, why it's been designated as worth preserving. They give you a pretty good idea. The Chaco culture was the confluence of trade routes. All of the Mayans, Aztec, Indians coming up from Mexico with the Plains Indians coming down. This was the crossroads of huge trade routes, and the buildings being uncovered there, they're still being excavated, are enormous. You could spend days there learning about it. Not even going to attempt the pronunciation of this one, but I can translate it for you. It's in Hawaiian, that means place of refuge. So it's basically a sanctuary. It's like in a Catholic, if you get to a church, you're Ali free, they can't come get you. This was it for if you had committed a murder, but you made it to this place, as long as it's pretty nice. It's all black sand beach. There's green turtles there. There's everything. It's on the Kona coast of the Big Island, but you can't leave. If you step outside the boundaries, they can nab you. Here in Massachusetts, New Bedford, the Whaling National Historic Park, Bedford. I mentioned the cotton mills. This was basically led the charge for America entering the age of industrial revolution. And here's our Minuteman National Historic Park. They reenacted on Patriots Day. You gotta get up early. It's at dawn. These guys, this wasn't much of a battle. They build it up. There were 8 total casualties combined, both sides. And they're across the river from each other. So either they weren't very good shots or it wasn't much of a battle. There were only 8 people killed. Not that that's light, but it wasn't a huge conflict. National preserves. National preserves essentially extend the boundaries of an existing national park if it needs more protection for some reason. It takes an act of Congress to create a national park. A president could set up a preserve. So Big Cypress, the Everglades were protected, but the Everglades now 1/7 of the actual Everglades. The Everglades flow from Lake Okeechobee all the way down the length of Florida, and it's just the park at the southern tip that's a national park. Well, a lot of that flow of water was being drained off for golf courses and condos and stuff. So they glommed on north of the Tamiami, the Big Cypress Preserve, to try to stem the flow of draining the flow. If that makes sense. Great sand dunes. Very, very odd place. This is south of Denver. It's in the middle of the country. I know you have sand dunes here up in Truro. These are 750-foot tall sand dunes. They're enormous. As the jet stream comes across the high lands of the dry high chaparral, it picks up grains of sand, but then it hits the 14,000 footers, and to get up and over it, it dumps the sand. So you have this accumulation of sand over millions of years. They're huge. The preserve is west of it so that it doesn't get paved, so that it can still pick up sand and the sand dunes won't go away. Mojave Preserve is in between Death Valley and Joshua Tree. It basically preserves, it actually preserves the section of the old Route 66 runs through there. No attack. Nobody was in danger of building condos up here. This is in between Kobuk Valley and Gates of the Arctic National Parks. They're inside the Arctic Circle, but it connects the migration route of the caribou herds that winter down in Lake Clark, and then they go up to the North Slope to calve in the summer. It just connects it and makes a totally protected path. All right, now we're getting up there. National monuments. Monuments has an asterisk because not all national monuments are administered to by the Park Service. There are 44 that are either Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, or the original BLM, Bureau of Land Management. And different rules depending on who's in charge. The difference between parks and monuments, the reason for their designation and who establishes them. So a national monument, we'll learn, Teddy devised a creative method of allowing a sitting president to name a national monument. That's for cultural, historical, scientific reasons. So you have national monuments are usually ruins or fossil sites, military forts. A national park takes an act of Congress. It has to go for a vote before Congress. If it's a yay, it goes to the president's desk and the president can sign it in. This is more for natural beauty, rare natural features that you don't want being destroyed. The Antiquities Act, 1906. The government had made a treaty with the Plains Indians out in the Badlands in South Dakota that this was to be their sacred territory. And that lasted until we discovered gold there. And now, get out of the way, in come the prospectors. Well, Teddy wanted to set aside, they had one very sacred site, Devil's Tower, that they didn't want white men around. Hey, get this, in 1906, the Senate didn't want to give the president what the president wanted. He wanted a national park, and the Senate said, no, we're not gonna pass that for you. They dug in their heels. So he came up with the Antiquities Act, which allows, he wanted to put federal agents there to protect it, and he didn't have the authority to do it. So he invented the Antiquities Act that allows the sitting president with the stroke of a pen to create a national monument. Not quite the same level of protection, but he could send people there. So Mesa Verde, they had just discovered the cliff dwellings were being raped and pillaged. Everybody was grabbing all the pottery and stealing stuff, and he wanted to put federal rangers there. So he used it. Grand Canyon, we look at it and it's magnificent. There were other interests. The mineral mining lobby saw it as an open pit mine. Look, it's all on display. We can have at it. And Teddy said, no way. So he used the Antiquities Act to set up Grand Canyon National Monument, and that was later upgraded. Oh, half of the existing national parks started out as a lesser unit designation, and then they got either promoted or kicked upstairs, either to make them larger, expand them, or just through visitation popularity, they got promoted. So 15 presidents have since used the Antiquities Act to name 217 different national monuments. Nixon, Reagan, and HW chose not to. So Devil's Tower was the first national monument. If you've ever seen Close Encounters, you know about Devil's Tower. Statue of Liberty, National Monument. If I ever get king for a day and have the authority, some of the existing parks might get redesignated back to where they came from. This one would be my first choice of elevating to national park status. It's in the northwest corner of Colorado. It straddles the Utah border. Actually, the fossil beds are in Utah. If you've ever been to the Smithsonian Institution, all of those dinosaur skeletons came from this fossil field. They're not taking any more out of it, but that's the fossil bed. They've left cliff sides on display with the bones sticking out of them. So you can go and see the remaining. But the eastern section in Colorado is the confluence of the Green and the Yampa River, both serious volume water. The rafting through this rivals the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. It's a magnificent, it's a big monument. I don't know, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no urban area close to it, so not a lot of people go there. I was gonna say, there's my three sons, but I get my knuckles wrapped when I use that term. My wife says, I helped. I said, I'm sorry, Fred McMurray didn't star in Our Three Sons. My Three Sons. Anyway, this is just north of Golden Gate Bridge in California. Muir Woods is a standard redwoods accessible. This is kind of confusing. The War in the Pacific is the national monument that includes Pearl Harbor. And then within Pearl Harbor, you have the Arizona, the Oklahoma, and the Utah. Each of the sunken boats remain intact, and they are each national memorials. Grand Staircase is one that's not under the Park Service jurisdiction, it's under BLM. So if you're thinking, the Grand Staircase refers to the Bryce Canyon, Grand Staircase, Zion, Vermilion Cliffs, Grand Canyon. It's as you go back in time, more and more geological layers are exposed, and it's like a giant staircase. Bryce being the least eroded and more recent versus the Grand Canyon, which was way back. So the Grand Staircase, you might have to step aside on your trail to let an all-terrain vehicle go by you. They may lease some of this land for mineral rights. BLM has different rules than the Park Service does. Mount St. Helens, I actually should have a picture of, remember when in 1980 when this blew, the force of the explosion toppled all those trees like pickup sticks, and they were everywhere. The monument had been under the Park Service, but they didn't want all that tree lumber to go to waste. So they transferred it over to the Forestry Service. That allowed the Forestry Service to go in and salvage the downed trees, which you couldn't do if it was under the Park Service. We have a new one here in New England. How would you like to have 87,000 acres that you didn't know what to do with? Roxanne Quimby owns Burt's Bees company, and she had this parcel that she wanted protected from the lumber industry. She didn't want the timber to be cut down or anything. She wanted it protected. So she gave 87,000 acres. It's basically northeast of Katahdin, big section. She gave it to the government, and President Obama used the Antiquities Act to set up a national monument. He did create a little controversy on the last few days in his office. He grabbed another few parcels to set up national monuments. 80% of all the land in the state of Nevada is already under federal jurisdiction. They don't have an awful lot of state parks, anything where they can lease out and get some revenue from. 80% of their land is under federal. Utah is 63%. So there was pushback. The senators from those states were already in negotiations for these parcels of land to get some kind of revenue coming in. To put it in perspective, any idea how much land in Massachusetts is under federal? About 1.2. So it's not an issue that we're familiar with around here. We don't really deal with it. 1.2% of Massachusetts is federal land. All the rest is individual, independently owned. Not the record though. Carter, on the way out after he lost in December of 1980, before Reagan came in, signed with the stroke of one. There are 8 national parks in Alaska. Denali was old. The other 7 came into being with the stroke of Jimmy Carter's pen in December on the Anoka Act, the Alaska National Interest Land Conservation Act. 56 million acres were set aside. National forests, national wildlife refuges, national monuments. Actually, all 7 of the parks were designated as national monuments, and then now they're all national parks. But top honors, Teddy Roosevelt. 230 million acres of American land he personally set aside to be conserved. 230 million acres. That's his legacy. There are still 150 national forests. He set up all of them. That was with Pinchot. Okay, now, whoops, sorry. Now we get up to the crown jewels, the national parks. Teddy was an outdoorsman. He got around. He stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon and just shook his head. He said, there's not one single thing that man can do to improve on what nature has done. Leave it alone. So he saw to it that places were protected. Yosemite Valley, Muir took him up and spent the night up on Glacier Point. Yellowstone, the first national park, had already been set up. People ask, what's your favorite park and stuff? There are several parks that are basically threefers. Yellowstone, this is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. It's stunning. You go for the thermal areas, look at the people on the boardwalk there, to give you some scale. That's the Grand Prismatic is a hot spring. It's a big one. And then the northeast corner of Yellowstone is the Lamar Valley. This is the Serengeti of North America. This is where the wolf packs are, where the coyotes and the pronghorn and wildlife sightings. Everybody goes to see the wildlife. I was there for a week in September. After about the 10th time of having to sit while the bison cross in front of you, wildlife sightings aren't quite up there anymore. So this is what's coming. Preview of coming attractions. You can grab one of these actually. I arbitrarily broke up the 63 parks. It takes 11 one-hour slideshow presentations to do a virtual tour of all 63 parks. So on the last Saturday of each month, after today's an overview, and then for the next 11 months, the last Saturday of the month, I'll be here and pick one. We're not going to do them in order. I'll bounce back and forth from east to west. All the cool ones are out west. But that's what we're going to do. And if you come to all of them, you'll have effectively visited all the national parks. So which one do you think is the most visited? Any guesses? Yosemite. Yosemite? Thank you for playing. Grand Canyon. Great Smoky Mountains. 13 million people. I'll guarantee you, they're not all there in January and February. So if you go in the springtime, it's not,
Wow.
there's your top 10. Great Smokies, if you drew a circle 50 or 100-mile radius around the park, there are so many urban areas and interstate highways. It's mainly accessibility. There's a lot of population centers that can get to it with less than a day's travel. So there's our top 10. Very, very new, different rules in going to national parks from, it's something like an old park, but you used to be able to throw the kids in the back, hey, let's go to a national park today. No more. Now you have to download timed entry permits just to get into the park. The more favored hikes, 4 months in advance, you have to pay for a lottery ticket and hope that you get selected to be able to climb the cables at Half Dome or Angel's Landing in Zion and stuff. They just have to find some way to meter the numbers of people that are going. There's a lot of baby boomers and they're retiring and they now have time to go see these wondrous places, and the parks are inundated. Unfortunately, there's no common method, that each park is trying their own system. So there's no uniformity. You have everything's different. So you really have to do some research if you're going to do that. Back to the See America, kind of smorgasbord of coming attractions. If you're going to spend a day out in the redwoods, here's a hint: you might want a chiropractic appointment either the end of the day or the next day, because redwoods are 300 feet tall. The lowest branches of a redwood are 100 feet off the ground. We don't even have 100-foot trees in New England. It's just, you can look at all the pictures you want until you stand there. You don't get it. It's very difficult to convey in a static shot. I hiked down to the water level of Crater Lake. This is just pollen from the pine that had blown down here. Look at the day that there's not a cloud in the sky. And this is not a blue filter or anything. That's the color of the lake. This is the deepest lake in North America. It's 1,900 feet deep. Absolutely amazing. This was third week in June and there's still snow on it.
Where's that at?
This is Crater Lake in southern Oregon, just over the Canadian border. This is the single most photographed sunrise shot in all the national parks. It's called Mesa Arch. It's in Canyonlands outside of Moab. And you have to hike there in the dark because you have about a 15-second window. You have to have your tripod set up and be ready, because when the sun pokes over the 11,000-foot LaSalle Mountains, it lights up the underside of the arch, and to catch that starburst, you gotta be ready. You gotta be in the right place and stuff. So it's a cool hike. This is my second climbing team. I'm at the 14,000-foot level of Mount Rainier here, going up to the summit. Seattle has a reputation of being rainy. I was sun blinded because it may be raining down below, but we're up above the clouds and there's the sunlight reflecting off the snow. I had black lenses on and got sun blinded. It's just so brilliantly bright. I've climbed Rainier 3 times. That's Mount Adams, Cascades, same trip going. People in Seattle are spoiled. They have 3 national parks within an hour's drive. This is going north to the Canadian border of North Cascades National Park. It's Boston Peak, actually. We physically drove to this site. My wife and I, this is looking from our futon, having lunch out the back of our van. Melting glaciers, waterfalls, beautiful. Never saw another person. I mean, you could be in the Swiss Alps. It was absolutely stunning. We didn't have to hike there. We drove right up to this. 2 hours, never saw another person. It's one of the least visited parks. The third one is over on if you drive down around Puget Sound on the Olympic Peninsula, Olympic National Park is there. all the jet stream coming across the Pacific, it's, the Olympics are 7,000 feet, they're not high, but to get up and over them, they dump all the rain. 340 inches of rain a year on the west side of the Olympics. You could be in the Philippines. It's a rainforest. There's my wife, by the way, on the lower branch, just to give you, that's a maple tree. But everything in the area is completely covered with moss because of the biomass, because of the moisture. Again, not that I'm against hiking, but this is from the railing of the visitor center at Wrangell St. Elias up in Alaska. We just went out to the deck, the back deck, and that's 16,000 foot Mount Sanford, isn't even the tallest mountain in the park. One of the Alaskan parks. Acadia is the only national park in New England.
Yeah.
50,000 acres. Yellowstone, 2 million acres. Some of the parks you can come into for an afternoon and kind of check it off your list. Okay, been there, seen that. 2 million acres. Wrangell St. Elias, 6 Yellowstones, 13 million acres of land. You want to see wildlife? Go during the salmon run to Katmai up in Alaska. This is from a viewing platform where these brown bears, 900-pound brown bears are walking right underneath you. They couldn't care less that humans are there. There's plenty of protein available for the taking. They're normally solitary hunters, but when the salmon are running, they put their differences aside and there's plenty for everybody. One of my favorite shots, that would be me in the black and red there, coming off the 20,000 foot summit of Denali, which in '99 when I climbed it was Mount McKinley. My son Brooks is scheduled to be climbing it this May, and he will now be climbing Mount McKinley because it was renamed this week. Not a lot of places you can get up close and personal with flowing lava, maybe over in Iceland at times. The lava on Kilauea in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park has been flowing constantly since 1983. The last time it fountained and was blowing up was 2008. Now slide has to be amended because 2 weeks ago it started spouting again. So it's blowing up. But my son Brooks and I sat up here on this corner at midnight for hours, just watching the lava flow, basically growing the island. As it hits the water, it solidifies and the island is growing. Somebody mentioned Haleakala before. This is sunrise from the 10,000 foot summit of Haleakala on Maui, which in the good old days used to have fun. We hopped on bikes after sunrise and rode bicycles from 10,000 feet down to the ocean, which you now can't do anymore because the Park Service is saving you from yourself. You want to see something that, to me, this looks like something Walt Disney would come up with if he had some pretty good drugs. It just doesn't look real. This is from the brim of Bryce Canyon in Utah. You got kids that are getting a little too big for their britches. Take them for a walk through. This is called the Giant Forest in Sequoia. 5 of the 10 largest living things on Earth are in this one grove. You walk around there and all of a sudden, you're not so important anymore. The thing's perspective changes. Not all hot and sweaty hikes. There's an underwater trail on Virgin Islands on St. John. There's plaques showing you the designation of the different types of coral or what species. I don't know how to get the fish to stay near their sign, but they do. Mojave, this is the Mesquite Dunes in the middle of Death Valley. your footprints disappear, it's constantly shifting sand, it's loose sand. So as soon as you get out there, your trail is gone, you're in the middle of nowhere. Or you can go up the glacier, up in Montana. If you climb high enough, you get a twofer. This lake here is flowing down the waterfall to create the second lake down below. It's at 10,000 feet. The marine version of the redwoods are out in the Channel Islands off of Monterey, off of Ventura, actually. These are 100-foot tall kelp beds. That it helps to have the scuba certification so you can stay down there, admire them. What's the zoning in Osterville? Quarter acre, half acre? This is one room in Carlsbad Caverns. It's called the Big Room. It's over 8 acres. One opening, one room is over 8 acres. You could stand literally for an hour and just turn around and not exhaust looking at the number of rock formations that are on display. It's staggering. This is the terminal end of the Holgate Glacier in Kenai Fjords National Park. You can kayak there. You don't want to go too close. The terminal end heats up and that's where the icebergs calve off. The icebergs are 200 feet tall. So when they hit the water, it's a serious wave that gets set up. I live in New Hampshire. People come from all over the world to come see the foliage in Vermont, New Hampshire. This is Shenandoah National Park down in Virginia. Not too shabby. March of 2020. The advent of the COVID shutdowns, I got quarantined. In between Fiji and Tahiti, there's a US National Park. I had flown down from Honolulu to American Samoa National Park, but because where there were no COVID cases recorded yet, and they wanted to keep it that way. So because my travel had started in Boston where there were cases, if you're going to be quarantined, an island in the South Pacific has it all over Newark, New Jersey. This is from the top of the, it's a flooded caldera. Actually, this is Pago Pago, the town there. I hiked up to the top of the volcanic peak. One section that doesn't need a wall built. This is Mexico over here. This is America. The Rio Grande has carved 3 different canyons through Big Bend National Park. This is Santa Elena Canyon, 1,500-foot cliffs for 15 miles. Great canoe, kayak, raft trip through there. Our one park in New England, Acadia, Rockefeller's built a 47-mile carriage road around the park. If you ever go there, there are 17 points where the road had to go over either a gully or a river or a stream. Rockefeller appointed each of the 17 places to a different mason and said, build me a bridge so that the road was level. You have to get off the road to go to the side to appreciate it. Otherwise, you don't know what you're going over. You don't see it. This is the cobblestone bridge, one of the 17. Look at the stonework. This was built in the early 30s. It looks like it was completed yesterday. It's just absolutely magnificent. And there's 17 of them. That's kind of a fun bucket list if you go to Acadia. The Everglades composed of 9 totally distinct separate ecosystems. That deserves a whole hour to go through it in its own, but these cypress trees are bizarre. They're deciduous trees, but they don't have any problem having their root systems completely underwater. So they line the canals. You can go, Isle Royale is the only national park that closes in the winter. It's on an island out in Lake Superior. All the other ones, you can go 365 days a year. You can go back to the same national park. If you went in the summer, you come in the fall when the aspen are changing and the views that you get, the pictures you go home with, totally different from the previous trip. Or you go to Yellowstone in the winter and, all right, you can take a snowmobile. The fountains don't shut off because it happens to, the Old Faithful still goes up. But you got a snowshoe out to it to get to it. It's just a very different experience, but year round, you can just keep going to these parks. For the benefit and enjoyment of the people, this is the Roosevelt Arch. This is the entrance to the first national park, Yellowstone. So I'll go through the Farrar family iteration of lifestyle. Remember, those of you back in the old days when you had to mail off your canister, your film, and wait a week to get your pictures back, and then the dates were on there. This is, the thing's blocking it. Up at the top, this is July 1969. This is me running over as a Boy Scout on my trip there to go watch Old Faithful go up. That was my first visit to a national park. And then we have full dome and half dome. Out in Yosemite, I'm going off hiking down. Oh, what the hell? It's only 7 miles down to the bottom of the creek. Yeah, but what goes down has to come up. 7 miles straight up is a challenge. But you want to share it with somebody, right? So along comes the wifey. Girlfriend at the time, I chose the 10,000-foot summit of Lassen Peak in Lassen Volcanic National Park. The first, and I might add the last, 10,000-foot summit that this woman has ever seen. But that's Mount Shasta in the background. Proposed to her, and now I got a travel buddy, so I gotta go back around. I get to go back around and see the parks again and share it, right? Well, then along come the kiddies. And these kids are starting to appreciate, they're in their 30s now, they're starting to appreciate, they had some pretty damn good trips as kids. But this is why mom is uninvited from further trips, because I'm sitting there saying, just move back a little bit. I can get, that's from upper, middle, and lower Yosemite Falls at 2,400 feet, the tallest waterfall in North America. I said, just move back a little bit, it'll frame it nicely, and they're sitting on the edge of Sentinel Dome, on the edge of the south rim of which was making mom a little nervous. I didn't lose any of them. They got to go ride the big fan boats on the Everglades and stuff. They hit school and now they're not in Snugglies anymore, you can turn them loose. This is in Moab. They're the kids here. They turned and said, can I go up there? I said, well, are you asking for permission? Or are you asking for an assessment of your climbing ability? It's a national park. You can go wherever you want. All he had to hear, gone. The little one, who was in the 8th grade at the time, is about 100 feet, note the lack of harness or climbing partner. Up he went to where the arch is over here. He's 100 feet up and he couldn't go up any further. Talk about personal development. You could see his chest swell with, I think to this day, he has this as his desktop image on his laptop. He was so damn proud of himself. No, he's doing the Rocky hands up.
Looks like it is too.
Oh my God. No, it's his brother who would be doing the handstand. The older one owns a CrossFit facility. He was an all-American diver and he would be doing the handstand up there. But then they go off to college and I need more buddies to travel with. So my 2 brothers come along with me. I took them up to Alaska to go see glaciers and took them down. This is Vermilion Cliffs National Monument. That's solid rock. At one time, it used to be the floor of an inland sea, and it's all solid sandstone. But each of the striations have a little texture to them. They bump out, so you can walk right up the sides of them. Stuff. That's me and my brother Pete. My brother Andy took the picture. We were there for hours. never saw another person.
Where is
Well, we actually parked in southern Utah and hiked 5 miles into northern Arizona. It's under National Park Service jurisdiction, so they have to allow people, you can imagine what the risk of generalizing, what skateboarders would do to this place. So they don't really want to let people there, but they have to. So there's a lottery, 10 permits a day, 10 people a day. If you have 6 in your group, only 4 other people can go for the entire day. So there's only, throughout every day, there's only 10 people that can be there. And you have to have had your name drawn at the BLM Bureau up in Kanab, Utah. Anyway, it's not easy to get there. I was a middle linebacker in high school football, so I was number 63. Didn't think my high school would miss the jersey, so I kind of squirreled it away, borrowed it, knowing full well it would come in handy one day. Glacier Bay was the cherry on top of my bucket list. That was the 63rd National Park that I visited to complete my list, and happened to have the jersey commemorative of the event. Talk about being a proud papa. In one week, I get a series of texts from my kids. The middle one, Jake, grew up in Medfield. He and a few buddies were tailgating, going down to a classmate's wedding in Tennessee, but he told them to pull over, and in Shenandoah. We had spent an afternoon sliding down the Slick Rock into this pool, and it was hot that day, so he told his buddies, pull over. So he sent me this, Dad, I remember that place you took us. So he and his buddies are in Shenandoah National Park. The very next day, I get this picture texted. My older son, Brooks, was taking his fiance at the time, rafting on the Colorado River. This is going over the Continental Divide in Rocky Mountain National Park, where the Colorado River is just a baby. They were up in Rocky Mountain, and the subsequent Friday morning, I got this picture sent. This was from the summit of Cadillac Mountain. The first rays of the sun that hit the US every day are visual from there. Why would I ever ask Dad about national parks? They're off on their own, they're visiting parks. I didn't know that any of them were going to parks, but I'm getting these series of texts, and it's just great. They're off on their own doing it. So we still go as a group and do climbs and hikes and stuff. We still get together. That's here in New England. To give you an idea of how near and dear the long-term generational impact of the parks. In 1985, when I was moving back, had met my wife grew up on Cape Cod. I grew up in Medfield. We met on a beach in San Francisco. So when we're gonna move back, I had never been down through the Red Rock area before, and I didn't want to be out there for 2 years and never had seen that. Middle of April, couldn't find anybody to come with me, so I did a solo trip down. I'm in one of the 5 Utah parks, Capitol Reef, climb up a couple thousand vertical feet to Cassidy Arch. Butch Cassidy's hideout is up there. Waited for 2 hours, not another person. I'm there by myself. And this is the rim. I had to set my camera up. I think 20 seconds was the longest I could set it. And then run like hell around to get in the picture standing on the arch. Finally got into one of them. I was 30 years old in 85. So 35 years later, I go back there with the boys, the same exact spot. Luckily, there were actually another family up there, and my son's camera was much better resolution than my original, but not a single thing has changed. They were the same age as I was when I first went there, and it was knee-jerk reaction, identical to my when we're, number one, I'm impressed that I can still go in August at 100 degrees up 2,000 feet to get up there. But they had the same reaction. They're looking at these rock formations. Oh, I can get up there, and off they go and scamper. Exactly the same places that I had done. So they're having the exact same experience. We now have four grandchildren, and they have no idea what's waiting for them. I can't wait, but they didn't wait for me. Brooks and Katie have little Kieran, he's already been up to the summit to watch the sunrise in Joshua Tree and scamper around. So he's been to his first national park without granddad. And I had a picture in Yosemite, my youngest son Galen was 3 months old. I was in Yosemite, and I have a picture of the entrance sign of Yosemite where he's propped up on top. I'm behind it holding him up. He replicated the picture with his daughter Rowan up at Acadia. He's behind her holding her up and stuff. And she got to watch sunrise from the top of Cadillac Mountain. So they're all doing their thing and going off and sharing in the same experiences. It's kind of fun. 84 million acres that are your parks. I've had so many people come up after talks and say, how do I get you in my backpack when I go to these places? You know so much about them. In the interest of giving the people what they want, I have formed a adventure tour company called Best View Adventures. If you go to Best View Adventures, I have cards up here if you want to take one. The left picture are BVA's Best View Adventures. Those are some pictures from some of the trips that I've been taking people on. That's Inspiration Point. When you come through the Wawona Tunnel into Yosemite Valley, that's your entrance. You've got Bridal Veil and the Three Brothers and El Capitan and Half Dome. My trip this July, I have a house in Yosemite, and upstairs, downstairs with 7 bedrooms for 4 nights. We don't even have to leave Yosemite. We stay there for 4 days. This is about 10 minutes from the house, so we go down every night with our adult beverages and watch the sunset, the sun walk down the valley across the rocks. It's absolutely spectacular. This was in Moab at Arches. This is the end of a 5-mile hike to get to Double Arch. Kind of a big, this is Sequoia, the big stump trail before it got protected, where they used to cut down the big trees, just to give you a little sense of the scale of these things. So it's this past August, at between 5,000 and 7,000 feet around the skirt of Mount Rainier, Paradise Inn is up there. The wildflowers have about 6 weeks. From the last 2 weeks of July into August, they have a 6-week growing period, and it is like the Johnny Appleseed of lupin or avalanche lilies or whatever the species. They're everywhere. There are fields of them. This was a hike that we were doing to go see all the wildflowers. Anyway, that's our intro. Do you have any comments or questions or stories?
Parks and units associated with Native American lands.
The question is, are there any of the NPS units on Native American lands? There's none of them dedicated to Native Americans. However, trying to keep ahead of the curve, I go do site visits to the up and coming, prospectively next designated national park sites, and Chiricahua National Monument is southeast of Tucson, and it's dedicated, it was Geronimo's, Cochise's hideout. It's where he held off, stayed hid in the hills from the cavalry that was trying to find him. That's in the top 5 of the next places to be designated as a national park. Mesa Verde is dedicated to the preservation of the ancient Anasazi cliff dwellings. There's quite a few national monuments there. The Black Hills, no, we basically chased them away. I mean, the Badlands are there, the Wind Cave National Parks are there. There are a few monuments, but not an awful lot. Yep.
I didn't see any mention of national wilderness areas. Where do they fall?
The question is, why didn't you cover national wilderness? Different agencies get put in, I think those might be under agriculture.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know I can't make heads or tails of the process as to who gets what. Whether they squabble for it and who wins, I don't know. Like the trail system, I don't understand at all how they divvy that up. They should be under the Park Service, but they're not. All right, thank you.
One
Oh,
more quick question.
yeah.
So if you could only go to 5, let's assume you're not hiking.
Without hiking, what 5 parks would I,
When I say.
Would I go to? Right. Strenuous.
Not
right,
hiking.
without elevation gain?
Right.
No, there are some that I would say put at the bottom of your list. Cuyahoga, actually, if you let me get up on this soapbox for a minute. The last 4 parks, within the last 6 years, we've had 4 new national parks. There has not been one word of discussion on the floor of Congress about the elevation of any of these. The Congress, don't like to bring politics into it, but the congressmen have figured out an end around to the normal process, the way it was set up. So there are parks where a one-liner, I don't know if you saw on my map of the National Lake Shores, there used to be 4. Indiana Dunes Lakeshore at the bottom end of Lake Michigan was a national lake shore. The congressman from Gary, Indiana, promised his constituents that he would bring a national park to the area. I don't know if you've ever been to Gary, Indiana. Hopefully nobody's from there. People in Indiana don't go to Gary, Indiana. This guy's bringing tourist dollars promising to bring it. What he wanted to do was elevate the National Lakeshore to national park status. So every year he would come back before the Park Service and say, I would like this to be a national park. And every year they'd find a new tactful way to inform this guy that, I'm sorry, there's nothing in Indiana worthy of national park status. What he did in 2017, when the government was shut down, President Trump had go or no go to sign a 1,000-page omnibus bill with no veto power. He just had to sign it to open the government again or not. This guy puts in a one-liner in the omnibus bill. Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore will now be known as Indiana Dunes National Park. Came from Congress, signed by the president. We now have a new national park. 3 more have followed suit on military budget appropriation bills. We now have White Sands National Monument is now White Sands National Park because the senator from New Mexico did the same thing. It's just not the way they were designed to do that. So there are some, I'm doing the inverse of your question. There are some that I would say, don't bother. You know, Cuyahoga Valley is in between Akron and Cleveland. It's a recreation area. It was a national recreation area. It got upgraded to national park by hook or by crook. It's the old Erie Canal stuff. So there are some that you don't want to bother with. Some of them are not to be missed. I'm partial to Utah. They're spectacular. To stand, I have a picture of me at the summit of Angel's Landing. If you don't have a fear of heights issue, it's like climbing the back of a stegosaur. It's 2,000-foot drop on either side, and it's a half mile to get up there. But boy, talk about the exhilaration of being on top of the world. That's cool. Yosemite. I lived in San Francisco. I spent almost half of my weekends out of Yosemite. That is nirvana. And you don't have to climb El Capitan, there are granite domes that give you easy purchase. You don't need special climbing shoes or anything, you can just hike up them. And the views of the upper Sierras that you get are spectacular. Yosemite, pick Zion, for one. Olympic, I showed you that if you're in Olympic and Big Bend are three parks in one. Big Bend, I showed you pictures of the canyon, Santa Elena Canyon through the Rio Grande. The Chihuahuan Desert comes up, most of it's in Mexico. 80% of Big Bend is the northern end of the Chihuahuan Desert. There's 70 different species of cactus in walks around the desert. But it's also the only park to totally include an entire mountain range, the Chisos Mountains. So you have these sky islands that have deciduous trees, maple trees, pine trees and stuff surrounded by desert. They're parks that I didn't have sufficient appreciation from at the time when I first visited there, that those are the ones that I would go back to and spend more time, because to say that you've seen the park, you should be there a little more. Yellowstone is, you gotta at least have that as a baseline, and I've been to the almighty Yellowstone. Most of my trips, I cover 2 or 3 in an area. You'll fly into one, like people are flying into Las Vegas in June. I'll pick them up with vans and then take them to Zion and Bryce Canyon, and I have cabins on the north rim of the Grand Canyon for several nights, and we'll do 3 of them. It's not a thorough exposure to the parks, but it'll give you enough insight as to, ooh, this is one that I want to come back to and stuff. You get a feel for what's there. Yellowstone, I told you, is 2 million acres. I have a house in West Yellowstone for a week that we'll be doing 6 different day trips to the different parts of Yellowstone. That demands a lot of time. I don't know, as you can tell, I like talking. I certainly like talking about parks, and I don't know, that's a tough question. Which of your kids are your favorite? Oh, bad.
If you were going to Bryce or Zion, what month of the year would you go to kind of not get too many crowds?
She's saying go to Bryce and Zion. We're going in June. That's what I deem to be optimal. You could go in September or October. Don't go, it's too hot in the summer.
Yeah.
You really can't.
On that, I've been to Grand Canyon the last few days of February and the first few days of March. There's no one there. We stayed in the campground. We had 36 hours straight of snow, but
Right.
there's no one there. And we went in May to Yellowstone. And again, it's not that bad.
In theory, it's off season.
It's all, quite,
Right.
it's off season. Of course, you gotta watch, you're gonna get closed off some of the.
What's happening now, and I was down at Chiricahua in January.
Yeah,
South of Tucson,
yeah.
inundated with Canadian RVs.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They pour down and they get out of Canada, they come down to the Southwest, so. You have to deal with numbers.
Yeah.